Right, hello there, welcome. This is going to be a short video tutorial on a musical technique known as straddling or chord straddles. It's not a new thing, it's something that many pianists will know all about, but it's not something I've directly encountered with a Melodeon, even though it works perfectly well on one of these too. So I thought perhaps that's a good subject for a video. The technique itself is very simple, but the way that you can build on it and use it is interesting. It can certainly add something to your playing. The technique can be used on pretty much any Melodeon, I believe. Certainly 1 row, 2 row, 3 row, all of that. The more buttons you've got, the more options you'll have, but that's the way it goes with those anyway, doesn't it? Anyhow, yes, so for this tutorial I'm going to use this one, a 2-row DG instrument. This particular one's got a 4th button start, so if that confuses you, pretend these two aren't there. I think that's the idea with that. And yeah, that's the preamble, I guess. Get right into it. What's all this about? As I said earlier, it's a very simple technique. There's actually 2 different versions we're going to do. One is 3-note straddling and the other one is 4-note straddling. And let's start with a 3-note one first. So to do this, we think of a 3-note chord. Any chord will do. For the sake of getting started, I'll choose D major. So we're going to have a D, F sharp, and A like that. And normally if you want to play those as a triad or a chord, press them all at once and you get that. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. However, to make it a straddle chord, what you do is you kind of split it into 2. The first half of it you play just the outer 2 notes, so that's this one, the D, and then the A. You play those together like that, and then you switch just to the middle one, and basically that's it. That's what a straddle is. You play outer ones first and then the inner one. You can repeat that whenever you like, so whenever you would have previously played, you can do instead. I mean, that's pretty much the sum of it really, which probably seems a bit disappointed, but stick with it because this does get good, I think. Next though is a 4-note straddle, and you probably won't be surprised to hear that you start out with a 4-note chord. And for this one, to demonstrate it to start with, we might as well use D major again and just use what we had before, and then put the extra top octave D on there as well. And so playing all of those at once, like that. Now you could, to straddle this one, play the 2 outer ones, which is now the 2 Ds, and then the 2 inner ones. But I don't think that's the best way to do it. The better way to do a 4-note straddle is to do the 1st and the 3rd note, so that's our D and our A, and then the other 2, the 2nd and 4th, the F sharp and then the top D. Like that. And that's it really. That's a 3-note straddle and a 4-note straddle. If you were really being determined, I suppose you could do a 5-note one, but I won't go into that. Most people wouldn't do that. So that's it, except it isn't. There's a few more things to discuss to make this interesting, so we'll get to that now. So we're now in thing number 1, and what is this? If you're following along and you've got your instrument out and you've tried what I've just done, you might well find that although I did this quite easily. If you try it, maybe it'll be easy for you, but maybe your fingers, yeah, maybe they won't really want to behave, and actually you'll get the wrong one down and all that. Don't be surprised about that. It is kind of a bit odd to actually alternate them like that. And you just need to build up a bit of dexterity, I think. So I would suggest, if that is a problem, if you are having trouble, just go as slow as you need to go. Just be really slow and deliberate, and then just give it a little bit of practice. Do a little bit each day. You don't even need your Melodeon, you can do it on a table like that if you like, and just get the feel of using your fingers in that way, and then build up the, and well, in no time at all you'll be sounding like a fire engine or an ambulance or something. So yeah, that's the first thing. You need to build up your dexterity. Right, okay, thing number 2. In the earlier section I showed you doing the straddling with D major chord. Now of course that's all very well, but maybe you want to do some different chords, and that would be quite understandable really. However, when you get on to doing other chords, maybe some of them are not so easy. The first one to mention though is just as easy as that, because if you do exactly the same thing on the inner row rather than the outer row, still pushing, you'll be in G major, and it will be just as easy. So that's fine. You've got 2 chords now. You can do D major and G major. Another one which is still on the row completely would be E minor. Now if you were going to do a 3-note straddle with this, it will be easy because they're next to each other. So those 3, E, G, B. So we can do, and that's all very well. However, if you want to do your 4-note one, the next note along isn't part of your G or E minor chord. You need to go one further on that last one up to there. So it'll be, which means you've got a gap now. So when you're doing your straddling, your fingers are going to be in a slightly different position, or your little finger will be anyway, something like this. So it's not difficult, it's just a bit different. And well, if you do the same thing on the inside row, then you're going to get A minor as well. So that's 4 chords you've got now that you can do it on. Beyond that, you're going to have to start using buttons on both of the rows to get more chords. One which is perhaps not too bad to do is, we go up a bit, we go to a B minor. So where are we at now? So we've got a B. So the B's are on the inside row, and the other 2, the what have we got? A B, a D, and an F sharp. So the D and the F sharp are on the outside one. At least that's where we're doing it. You've got a D on both, but this is more comfortable. So we can do one there. So that's quite an easy one to do. Another common chord, A major. That goes down a bit. Now this one, again, you need to cross the rows. You say you need an A, and then you need your C sharp, which is sort of a fair distance from the A button. And then you need an E, and then you need your A again. And that one starts to get a bit awkward. There's a big stretch there, but it's still possible. So far I've mentioned major and minor scale, minor chords only, not scales. However, if you want to do some other type of chord, and you can do it on your particular instrument, then you can really. So you could do A minor 7th chord, which would be something like that's the chord itself. So if you straddle it, you could do that one, or you could do perhaps a sort of a suspended one. Would be a D suspended. Really, any 4 notes that you can reach, you can do this on, but you're probably going to want to keep it to the ones that you understand what you're doing, so that you can match them up on the left hand when you start adding that in as well. So yeah, there's a bunch of chords that you can do there. If you find all this talk of chords and majors and minors and the suspendeds and all of that stuff a bit confusing, this isn't really the video to find out about that. I suggest going and doing a bit of homework. There's going to be web pages and YouTube channels and all sorts of things that are going to explain that to you. So I would strongly suggest going to do that, because all of that knowledge about chords is something which applies really heavily to Melodeons in particular, because that's the logic behind why Melodeons are like they are. And the more you understand it, the better you're going to understand your instrument. So if chords confuse you, make that your resolution perhaps to find out a bit more about how they work. I'd certainly recommend that. Right, now it is time for thing 3, and as you would have seen in the title, this is about inversions, about chord inversions. Now if you've not heard of inversions before, as I just said earlier, you probably need to go and do some homework and find out about what that means, because it's something which is very useful and very relevant to Melodeon playing in general, and it's not a difficult thing. It's worth finding out. So, having found out what inversions are, you can probably guess where this is going now, because in the previous section I showed you several chords which we then straddled, but none of those were inverted. They were all root chords. However, you can of course straddle an inverted chord too, and this is actually something that's really worth thinking about in particular and not forgetting about, because you'll find this very useful. So what could we do? If you start back to D major again, our D major chord before, and we straddled it like that. So if you want to invert that one and straddle that, this is actually super easy, because all you do is just move your hand along one button, and then you're in the position to do a first inversion, and then you can do and it's just that. Super easy, not really a problem. And go along one further position there, and you're in the position to do a second inversion. So go one further, and well, you're back to the root again, an octave up. And of course, if you can do it on that row for D major, you can do it on this row for G major. So like that. Now obviously you can invert any of the chords we do, and something I haven't mentioned yet is C major chord, and I did that, well, I omitted that for a reason, because, well, on an instrument, Melodeon, the C major chord, if you want to do the full 4-note chord, on most instruments, where are we starting there, you have to kind of start up this end a little bit, which is kind of an awkward one to do with 4 fingers just as a chord. And it's often quite a long way from where your hand often is, because if you're playing down this end, which many English Melodeon players do, you don't want to be going up there really. Now this particular instrument is kind of an unusual one. It has a low C note on the pull, So I can actually do a C chord here as well. However, many people don't have that, and so you can't do that. So what do? Well, it so happens that the second inversion version of the C chord, which starts about there, and notice I've changed which row that I play the E on there. No, yeah. So I've got 2 on the outside, 2 on the inside to do that. And that's much easier place to play a C chord in general, and it's a much easier place to straddle it as well, rather than all that up the top. So that's a good reason for knowing about your inversions, because sometimes they're in a much more convenient place to use them than just trying to use the root ones all the time. One other thing to mention, and this is kind of tricky, is that if you try to invert the E minor chord, for instance, or A minor, probably others as well, but with the E minor, if you remember, there was a gap. We were going along the outside row, and then a gap, and then to the end one. Now if you invert it, the gap kind of still is there, but so you have 2 before the gap and 2 afterwards. And if you try to straddle that, you can do it, but it's kind of awkward. So that actually makes it more difficult. You could, but possibly, this may or may not be easier, you could try using your index finger on both of the lower notes, and then just move it. Or not, it depends on what you're doing with it really, but that was one suggestion. But yeah, some of them work out well, and some of them kind of start getting a bit tricky to manipulate your hands to get them. But yeah, that's all to be discovered really. Hope you're following along, because the next bit is where things get a bit more interesting, maybe. Right, okay, so we've looked at straddling on various different chords, and we've looked at straddling on inversions of those chords as well. So the next thing you might very well want to do is to actually straddle one chord, then straddle another one, then straddle another one, and start to almost play music really. So let's have a go. Start on a chord, let's say E minor. That's a nice one to go with. So we could straddle that. And then think of another chord we like, C major. And then G major. And D major. Add in a bit of bass with it, and it's going to start sounding like a bit of music. Something like that. So it's a case of beginning to work out what it feels like to go from one straddle to another one. So I mean, even simpler than that, do a D major one, and then to E minor, change the rhythm a bit. Change it up a little bit, and you start to get something which is, well, almost starting to be a bit musical. One thing that is worth noting with this is quite fun, where I mentioned the inversions before, actually cycling through the inversions on a chord, that sounds quite cool. That's kind of a neat effect if you can get it up to speed. So if I do that on a D major chord, for instance, so we do that, so this root, like that, kind of an effect. So that's worth worth doing, and you can do that on any of the chords, but some of them are a lot more difficult than others. That one's straightforward and easy, but some of them seem to require a bit of finger gymnastics to actually work. But yep, something to play with and something to work on. Okay, right then, that's probably all of the technique I want to mention. I said at the beginning that it was a very easy, straightforward technique to use and learn about, and hopefully you've picked up on that, but hopefully as well you've started to get an idea of why you'd want to do it. That last section in particular, if you start combining the straddling together, it starts to sound musical, and you've probably already figured out that actually this is something that I can start to incorporate into the tunes I play. When you start to think about it, you'll suddenly find places where there was nothing going on before where you could put one in, or whether that perhaps the melody moves in a way that you recognize from straddling exercises, and you think, oh, I could actually incorporate some more notes here because I know I can do that in the chord that I'm using. So yeah, that's the gist of it. With that little idea, you can start adding things in. You can add 4-note ones in, and sometimes you might just think, well, I just need a 3-note one in here because that's going to just sound just a little bit more subtle. And that's good to do as well. Having learnt the 4-note ones, the 3-note ones are kind of easy, they just happen. So as an example of what you might do, the tune Emma, I think many people know that one. I could add say a 4-note and a 3-note one in here somewhere. If I do the first section without anything, and then I'll add one in as we go around, so you'll see what I mean. So there's a couple in there. If you work at it, maybe you can get a lot more in, depends on the tune and how far you want to go with it. But yeah, that's straddling, or chord straddles. Hope you found that useful and interesting and inspiring, and maybe something that you can develop and use in your own music. So thanks for watching. Cheers.